Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Fagan. I'm the Associate Curator at the Sixth Floor Museum at Dealey Plaza. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the last session of our Legacies History Conference. This is our second in a series of what we call History Maker Conversations with a local living legend, and you are in for a real treat today. A couple of announcements before I introduce our moderator. If you entered the drawing for the book at the Sixth Floor Museum table upstairs, the Institutional History Assassination and Commemoration, we do have a winner, if I can fish it out of my pocket here. Julie Ann O'Connell has won the drawing. So Julie, wonderful. If you will just see me after the program today, right over here, I will gladly give you that book. Thank you. And you might notice there are a couple of cameras here in the theater right now. We are recording this, and it will be edited and uploaded to the Sixth Floor Museum's YouTube channel. And you can access that going to YouTube, searching for Sixth Floor Museum, or even easier, just go to our website, jfk.org, and there's a direct link to our YouTube channel there. You'll also find on our YouTube channel last year's History Maker Conversation, which was a wonderful discussion with former Dallas Mayor Wes Wise, moderated by Dr. Darwin Payne. You'll also find a wide variety of Sixth Floor Museum programming, oral history presentations, panel discussions, educational initiatives, exhibit videos, really something for everybody. The museum does go beyond November 22nd, 1963, and really explores the history and culture of Dallas and the 1960s. So you'll find civil rights, Vietnam presentations, Peace Corps presentations, quite a lot to see on our YouTube channel. All right, and now it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator today. Award-winning journalist Mercedes Oliveira has been writing a weekly column on Hispanic issues for the Dallas Morning News since 1975. She is the only... I'm just getting started, so hang on. She is the only Latina to write a column continuously for a major metropolitan newspaper on a wide range of issues, from politics to culture to education to healthcare. She is also a regular contributor and commentator on Inside Texas Politics on WFA Channel 8. In addition, go ahead, go for it. In addition to her weekly column and her role as a morning news staff writer from 82 to 88, Mercedes served on the journalism faculty at TCU from 1988 to 1999. She also taught communication courses and did field research in Mexico in the 1990s. Mercedes is a Dallas native, a graduate of the University of Dallas with a master's from New York University, a great local treasure. It is a pleasure to have her as our moderator for this special conversation today. Please join me in welcoming Mercedes Oliveira, who will introduce our guest. Thank you.
Thank you. A sweet time. Thank you. It's my pleasure today to introduce and talk to Anita Martinez, who was the first Hispanic elected to the Dallas City Council. Anita was born in 1925 in the area of Dallas known as Little Mexico, or as some of us called it La Colonia or El Barrio. Little Mexico is gone, and the old neighborhoods have been replaced by Crescent Court and Harwood International high-rise buildings, among other large developments. Anita is a fifth-generation Texan of Mexican descent. She began her civic activity at the young age of 14 when she circulated a petition in her neighborhood to get Pearl Street paved. And she succeeded. Anita learned early that each of us can make a difference. That summer, she also was a summer volunteer at St. Paul's Hospital, mopping floors and changing bed sheets. In 1951, she was a volunteer swimming instructor and lifesaver for the Red Cross. But she spent the 50s and 60s working with the PTAs at the schools her children attended. She was a very devoted mother. Holy Trinity, St. Monica, Thomas Jefferson High School, Ursuline, and Jesuit. In the 1960s, she served on the board of the Dallas YWCA and also was president of the Dallas Restaurant Association Women's Auxiliary. From 1969 to 1973, she served 2 terms on the Dallas City Council. She has been a lifelong volunteer, and as a Dallas City Council member, she was an advocate for the people of West Dallas. She brought numerous 20th century improvements to that area while in office. She fought for West Dallas's first city-built recreation center, the Anita Martinez Recreation Center, it became known, and is founder of the Anita Martinez Ballet Folklorico, which is now celebrating 41 years of helping Hispanic youth through education and the arts. Today, Anita works continuously on behalf of the Ballet Folklorico by raising money to keep it moving forward. So we're going to start off with some questions that I think a lot of people would like to know. And that, my first question is, who approached you first about running for the Dallas City Council and why?
Well, it was a very stunning revelation to me that this young lady called me late one night. It was about 10:30, and her name was Kendi Estrada, I now know. And she said, I just spoke to Bill Alexander, and I wanted to talk to someone, a lawyer, that would tell me if he could recommend somebody to run for the city council. The person that has announced right now is not somebody that we would like. And she said, would you run for the city council? I said, I don't know. I said, I'll have to ask my husband. I thought, what is a city council? So anyway, my husband came later that night because we owned the El Phoenix restaurant. So I mean, he worked almost 24 hours a day. And I told him, I said, guess what? This lady, Kendi Estrada, called me that she wants me to run for the city council. And he said, are you nuts? He said, haven't you got enough to do? I said, but that's just it. I was working with the Ursulines. I was working with the Jesuits. I was president of the Dallas Restaurant Association. And I said, from up there, I can really see more and be more effective. So he went ahead and gave me his blessing, never dreaming that I would make it to first base. But he said, don't let anybody know that you're with Phoenix Restaurants, because you might be running against somebody that our people are supporting, and I don't want to hurt their feelings. So I ran, never mentioning El Phoenix.
So how did you feel about running?
Well, I felt very good because I was working in so many directions that I thought, gosh, from up there I can really help people more, you know, and more people, and maybe I can get more people to help.
Well, one of the things I think that you did was make the first Latino appointments to city boards and commissions. Do you remember who some of those were?
Yes, I was one of I was working on the bond program, and by that time my nomination, I served for 4 years, 2-year terms, so it was ending, and I knew that the West Dallas really needed a public library. So I called my friend that she was at the time supporting my opponent, but it didn't matter to me. I called her. I knew that she would be very effective. Adelfa Callejo, very strong lawyer here in town. And I said, Adelfa, I said, I'm going to be leaving, you know, my position soon. My term is up, but I really want you to help me have a center built in West Dallas. I said, I want it on the bond program, and the bond program was coming up later, you know, later that month. And so she said, okay. So she did join the library board and helped me get the library on the bond program. And she was a very effective board member. She became president of the Dallas board of the Dallas Public Library.
And what about the school board? Did you also?
And then the school board, yes. I found out that there was an opening on the school board, and I called Trini Garza, because I knew that he was an engineer, and I knew that he would make a good board member for the public education. So I called him and I said, Trini, would you please run for this position that's open on the school board? He said, oh, I don't know. He said, let me think about it. I said, think about it. I'll call you tomorrow. So I called him the next day, and he said, well, okay, I'll do it, you know. So he made a wonderful board member. Not only did he serve for 9 years, but then he also brought his son along, and when he left the position, then his son took over. But he made a wonderful school board member.
Well, in talking about some of the public parks and earlier lecture, I was interested in, it brought back memories for me of Pike Park. Pike Park was in the heart of Little Mexico, which no longer exists anymore. But it was where all of the Mexican-American and the Mexican fiestas were held from beginning in the early part of the 20th century. So what condition was Pike Park in when you took office, excuse me, and what was your first project to improve it?
Oh, yes, very much so. I got sworn in on Cinco de Mayo on the steps of the old City Hall, Dallas City Hall. And that night, there was a program going on, like there was every Cinco de Mayo at Pike Park. So I asked my council members, and what's his name, the mayor? Eric Johnson was our mayor, and a wonderful friend too. And I asked all my council members if they would please go to this festivity that was happening that night. And so they said, yes, we'll come. So they all showed up. And as we were sitting there and listening to the music and listening to the performance and people speaking, and then when I got up to speak, thanking the people for coming out and voting and voting me in, you know, with a very high, next to to the mayor, I got more votes than anybody on the ballot. And that was because I had all my friends and relatives, and it got to the point where the mayor would say, my council members would say, you know, my things aren't getting out of the warehouse. And the mayor, Eric Johnson, would say, well, get Anita's family and friends. They'll get them out for you. So anyway, when I got up to the podium to speak, I couldn't hardly see my hand in front of me. It was real dark, and I didn't remember the park being that way. When I was a little girl, it was all lit up, and you know, your mother was a patron saint of Pike Park. She was always heading up the fiestas and the activities that were going on, but the park had gone down, you know, since she had left her volunteer work at the park. So anyway, it got real dark, and I was so embarrassed. When I got back to my seat, I told the mayor Eric Johnson, I said, I am just stunned, you know, by the park being in such disarray. The swings were off their chains, and the fountains didn't work, and the bathrooms, you know, were awful. And so he saw how hurt I was. So the next morning, I got up early and I went to the L.B. Houston's office, the park director, and I said, Mr. Houston, why has that park, Pike Park, been left in such disarray? And he said, oh, Councilwoman, that park is a very valuable business property, and it's going to be used as a landmark, as business, build a business there. And I said, not in my lifetime. I said, I want everything that's been done to other parts, or all the improvements. I said, I couldn't even hardly see my light in my hand in front of my eyes. I said, it was so dark. And so he said, well, I don't know, Councilwoman, it's just not in the budget. I said, well, we'll see. You know, so anyway, when we were having our meeting and everybody was justifying their projects, that, you know, every council member and what they were having all this money allocated on the bond program, when Mr. Houston got up and he raised his lighted little stick and pointed to where, he needed a little bit more money for some very minor renovations in one of the parks. And so I turned to him and said, "But Mr. Houston, I thought you told me there was no more money on the budget for on the bond program." So I got the stick and I pointed it to him, and I said, "Look at this." I said, "This area that I'm been talking about and advocating for doesn't have anything. It was just a blank." And so I said, "No," I said, "I will not work for this bond program." I was very hurt, and my council members were very astonished because I never acted up in public. I always, I always had my discussions with them, in private. And so I said, they were just stunned. So the next week when we had our meeting, Fred Zeter, that was one of the council members, made a motion that we include a rec center in West Dallas, and that it be named Anita Martinez.
But you were talking about Pike Park.
Oh,
No, we're talking about Pike Park first.
oh yeah, we're talking about. Okay. Let me finish Pike Park first.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that
okay,
one in a minute.
okay. And so anyway, the next year when we went before the festivities at Pike Park, and I got up the podium to speak, the park lit up just like daylight. They had installed 17 mercury vapor lights in the park, and they had put all these beautiful, well, they were animals, but the kids could get on them just like a seesaw, and water fountains, and then the toilets worked, and they was painted. So it's now become a historical landmark. And Mercedes Mothers has been a patron saint for that park. The events that went on there when I was a little girl that I remembered.
Yes, it's been the heart of Little Mexico, and now it's just...
Yeah, now it's a historical landmark.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the Martinez, the recreation center that you helped also found. There was also in West Dallas, because it is the poorest section of Dallas, there was a need for something like this.
Oh yes, very much so.
So how did that
happen?
happen?
So the way that happened was I had asked the mayor and the members of the city council if they would go with me to West Dallas, because I wanted them to see what I was trying to explain to them, that we needed a lot of help there. It was really in a very poor condition. So they did. And I wanted the city manager to go, and I wanted the chief of police to go, and I wanted the head of the Park and Rec, Mr. Houston, to go. And so they all came, and they built a very small little platform, not any taller than this. So we were all standing there. And when it started getting dark, you couldn't hardly see your hand in front of you. There were no street lights. It was really, and I mean, it just 10 minutes walk, from City Hall, but it was in just such poor condition.
And this is where you were going to put the recreation center.
The rec center in that area,
okay.
yeah. And so anyway, I was telling the people, I'm here to support you. I know that you need things done here in your community, but you've got to show up at the City Hall meetings so that I can advocate for you and you can back me up. So I said, but it can't be done without you. And so when it started getting dark, you couldn't, there again, you couldn't see your hand in front of you. There's no street lights, no anything in West Dallas in that area at the time. And so...
So you worked to put the rec center on a bond as well?
Yes,
okay.
Oh yes, to get the, so anyway...
and when did the center open? Do you remember?
No, gosh, I don't remember.
1975?
1970, 73.
Okay. 76. Okay.
76.
Your son is telling us 1976.
Well, I know because by this time I had gone off. You know, I had received a recommendation from the president to join the Peace Corps and do some evaluations. So I left that cooking while I served for 3 years.
Yes, and that was in 1974.
Yeah.
That you were appointed by President Richard Nixon.
Mm-hmm.
So then, taking a look at the Ballet Folklorico, once the rec center was built, then you felt something else was needed.
Yeah, then I saw something else that the kids were holding back, and we had a large black community there, and the kids were wonderful, you know, playing basketball and moving back and forth across the court, and our kids would just be looking at one ball going one way and then looking the other way. And I said, why don't you all participate? But you know, our black Americans are such great basketball players. So I thought, well, what can I do to instill pride in them and have them participate in the activities that are going on here in the center? So that's why I started the Ballet Folklorico. So I remember when I was a little girl, 7 and 8 years old, that I danced, and how much fun it was for me to have the neighbor. Everybody was related to one another. Everybody was your aunt or your grandmother, and she would make crepe dresses for us when I was 7 and 8 years old. And there was about 6 of us girls, and we would perform, and the neighbors would go by it from work in the evening, and they would look over the fence and watch us dance and then applaud for us and move on. And I thought how wonderful I felt, you know, to have that confidence given to me and reassurance. So I thought, I better start, you know, something like that here. So I did. And the kids just hearing the music, it motivated them. At first the boys didn't participate that much, but the girls did. But then when they saw them getting newspaper coverage and all this, then they decided they wanted to join too. So 40 years later, it's still going on. And
I think it wasn't the also inaugurated with seed money from the Women's Auxiliary of the Dallas Restaurant.
Yes.
They helped as well.
Thank you for reminding me that to say that. I had been president of the Dallas Restaurant Auxiliary, and so they gave me seed money to start, you know, the folklorico program at the rec center. Thank you.
And then in the 1980s, you went back to the Dallas City Council and you lobbied the council to add to the Dallas Bond program an additional funding for a second floor to the existing Anita Martinez Rec Center, right?
Yeah, because it was the smallest rec center in the city of Dallas, with only 13,000 square feet. And we proved by their records, because at that time, every person that came in had to sign. And by their own records, we proved that we were the highest youth center in the city of Dallas. So then I campaigned to triple the space. And they said, well, you know, if it does pass, we're going to do a second floor. And I said, well, if it does pass and you have to put on in a second floor, then I would like to have a spring-loaded dance floor. So they said, well, that's very expensive. So I went to New London, Connecticut, because I found out that there was a rec center there that had a spring-loaded dance floor. So I spoke to the architect, and he gave me all the details about the cost and everything. So I came back, and I showed it to the builder, and I said, this is what it'll cost. And I said, we really do need it, because that's what this center needs for this community. So they put it in, and I was so happy, because I thought, I mean, it had mirrors all the way from one end of the building to the other, and then it had the ballet bar, and I said, this is great. But then Mr. Houston said, L.B. Houston said, you're going to have to, you can have the center once a week, but that's all because it's got to be available to the rest of the community. So I thought, oh my God, I thought I was going to have it just for our dancers. So anyway, I got very busy looking for other places, to be housed at. So we have gone from pillar to pole, from one end of the city to the other, having our group, rehearse. And now we're in a old East Dallas fire station that the police department was going to have for their programs. And I kept calling the captain. I said, well, have you gotten the money from the city? And no, he hadn't gotten it. He was asking for $5,000 to do some restoration work on it. And he said, no, he said, I haven't received it. So I called him every week. And then finally he said, you know what? I'm just going to tell the city manager to let you have the building because, it's going to need too much restoration and they're not going to do it. So, and I said 5,000, but it was 50,000. And the building is 100 years old. So we got the building, and just about 10 years ago, they gave it to us. But it needs a lot of work. So we're
Fundraising constantly.
yeah. Yeah.
So there's another facility, it's now an institution in West Dallas, known as it's the Los Barrios Unidos Community Clinics. Very important medical and healthcare facility. How did that come about? I know you had a lot to do with that.
Well, yes. Well, I had told the community, I said, let's work on 10 things that you need here in West Dallas, because this young man, and no relative, Pete Martinez, was one of the active members in the community. And when we had that first meeting with them, that the council members came and were with me, he said, oh, you all come over here and you give us all this rah-rah and that you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And then you go back to your ivory tower and forget about us. And, the mayor was there, Mayor Eric Johnson, and the Park and Rec and the police, and everybody had come, to that meeting. So I jumped off the little pedestal and I went straight to where he was and I said, what is your name? And he said, Pete Martinez. And I said, well, I believe that you're really interested in your community, or you wouldn't be here and advocating for what is needed. And I said, I need your help to help me get the people organized. And then another young man that when I got elected, he was the first one to come to my house and congratulate me and said, what can I do to help you? And I told him. So he was
John Zapata Gonzalez?
John Zapata Gonzalez. Yeah, thank you. So he was always there, at my right hand, to help me. So he and Pete Martinez got together and helped me organize the people to come to City Hall. And a lot of them were so humble, and it was just a 10-minute walk to City Hall. But a lot of them had never even crossed the Trinity River to come to downtown. So the council members would see them just very humble and just very, quiet and very timid. And they admired them.
They made their case.
They made their case, and I made my case that we needed help for these people,
And I think eventually, you had the help of Congressman Jim Collins.
Oh yeah,
you had federal funding.
He saw one of the 10 things that the people said they needed was a clinic. So I said, well, let's get started, and we got somebody to donate some little prefab little buildings, 3 of them, and so then I think we had some publicity in the newspaper that there was some vermiculite from companies in West Dallas, and vermiculite is a very little thin, like little porous white material that they would only do it at night. And when you got up, it was just all over the buildings. And I got almost a front page article in the paper about what was happening in West Dallas, with this building spreading this vermiculite. So I didn't realize that was Congressman Collins' district. So he got in touch with us, and he helped us get these small buildings that we could have, for the people, because they didn't want to go all the way to Parkland, because they said a lot of times, they had to stay there too long, and they didn't pay attention to them. So we got those little buildings built. Well, that were built.
Situated.
Yeah, situated.
Yeah,
thank you.
Area.
And now it's a 10 million clinic.
$10 million facility.
$10 million clinic, and there's one that's facing, no, it's $1 billion. It's a $1 billion.
No.
No?
No. No.
No, 10 million, just 10 million?
Well, it's grown significantly.
Yeah. And his face is Singleton, and then there's another one, also Los Barrios Unidos, and the people named their organization Los Barrios Unidos, because this is United Neighborhood. And I said, so they had a big part in helping me build that area.
Well, this has been a really great conversation and a walk back through history. Are there any questions? Anybody have any questions that they would like to know about back in that period? Yes.
You mentioned the Peace Corps. Could you tell us a little more about
Yes. I was appointed by President Nixon to evaluate Peace Corps programs. That's why I had called my friend to make sure that the bond program went through and had the library in there, because I knew that I wasn't going to be here to fight for it, but you have to. And so anyway,
that was 1974.
Yeah,
right.
That was 1974. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how many countries did you travel to?
North Africa, the Near East, Asia, and the Pacific. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was a wonderful experience, because we had to write. When we went to a country and we got back to a home, we had to write and then give the report back, to the Action Center in Washington. And this young lady called me and she said, I need to write a story about you. She said, I'm a student at the University of in Denton.
North Texas State University back then.
Yeah.
It's now University of North Texas.
Yeah, and we have been given an assignment to write about a lady that has done things for the country, for the community, and she said, could I come and interview you? So I said yes. So she came to interview me. She handed in her story, and she got a very good grade for it. And then I said, why don't you volunteer for me? And she said, oh, I'll be happy to. So I had the best reports from I went to a country, to North Africa, Near East, and the Pacific, because I would come back and she would translate my scribbling and, the things that I felt like they needed, to look into. And so we became very good friends, and she worked as a volunteer for me for about 5 years.
Another question? Yes.
I've heard an interesting story about Anita wanting to go to school at St. Anne's.
Oh,
Down there
yeah.
in that area, in the old Little Mexico area.
Yeah. Thank you.
That her mother said she didn't have the right kind of clothes.
I don't know. She didn't have the money, my mother, because you had to pay to go to St. Anne's. And I was at a center there on Ackerd and what was it, other street, I don't remember. But I was on the second floor, and I was looking out over the windows and over at Harry Hines, and I saw this very peaceful lady. I didn't know what she was, going from one end of the courtyard to the other, from the school to the to their home. And my mother had said, never, I was like about 8 years old, never cross Harry Hines because it's very dangerous, very trafficked. And so I said, oh, I've got to find out what's going on over there. So I looked both ways and I dashed across Harry Hines and I tugged the sleeve of the nun. You know, just had their hands in like this and their big wing hats. And I said, what's going on here? And she said, it's a school. And I said, what kind of school? She said, well, you know, it's a grammar school. We teach first grade to seventh grade. And she said, where do you go? I said, I go to Cumberland. Y'all know where Cumberland is. And next to the Fairmont Hotel. And so she said, well, why don't you come to our school? We'd be happy to have you. So I was just so taken, you know, by the tranquility and the kindness. So I asked my mother, can I go to that school? And she said, you know, to go to that school, you're going to have to pay tuition and you're going to have uniforms. And so, and she said, we don't have the money to do that. So the next day, I was up on the building where we were having our sewing classes, and I looked at it and I saw the nun, Sister Beatrice. I found out her name, and she's going across the courtyard. So I ran across the Harry Hines again, and I tugged at her sleeve and I said, no, my mother says I can't come because you have to pay tuition and uniforms. She said, don't worry about that. We let the tuition go, and I'll find you some uniforms. So we went up to the attic, and they had, you know, clothes that were given away, and then the nuns would wash them and iron them, and then put them in different bags, you know, with different sizes. So we went through the bags and the sizes and got got my uniforms.
That's great. That's great.
That's where the St. Anne's restaurant is today.
Right, yes.
Yes, Liz?
I have to ask, because maybe I knew this at one time. Kata Scott was called the mother of Pikes Park.
Yes, she was.
Was that your mother?
That was my mother. That is my mother. She's still alive, yes. Yes.
And she,
My love.
Oh,
yeah,
well, thank you.
she was a patron saint because she really did a lot of work with the people. Yeah.
Any other questions? I guess this concludes this portion. Thank you so much.